Hello folks, welcome to another week. It's Manny here. We're going to learn some more Linux. This week we're going to talk about systemd services, how to start and stop services, and we're going to talk about your first server application and dealing with time synchronization. So we'll talk about protocols, we'll talk about systemd, we'll talk about unit files, we'll install some stuff, check some config files, and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look into the time_date_ctl command, which is a service unit file or daemon that runs that allows time date to work. And you can look up how to use it by using the man page and do time_date_ctl. That's the command, and there are lots of different functions in there. So if you want to change your time or set your time, this is the systemd way to do it, using the time_date_ctl command. So if we just type in time_date_ctl, you'll get a response back with the time that you have set up locally on your machine and time zone that it's set up to right here. So this is my current system. UTC, which is Universal Time Coordinate. And then there's also GMT, which is, this is what we are with Greenwich Mean Time. So our time is set up for Greenwich Mean Time. Currently the system is not set up for NTP. It says it's active, but we're not synchronizing with anything else that I know of. Let's see if we can do the man page, see if it can show what our time date status, time sync status. NTP servers. So if we did the time and we did NTP servers, what's supposed to go here now? I don't see the NTP servers, so there shouldn't be any, even though it says it's on. We'll get into that in a little bit later. But the time_date command allows us to check and configure a lot of our configurations for our system. That being said, how do we control some of those systems or services? Systemd uses what's called sockets to start and stop services, and it can do a lot of them in parallel, meaning it can use a socket to connect to one service and another service and start them all at the same time. If one service needs another's response, then it can actually, systemd will let it wait until the other one is ready for it and then be able to coordinate that between the two of them. These services, these sockets get into these units, and these units each have a config file. And these config files, our unit files, is how we actually manage things. There are service unit files, which is what we're going to look at now. We're going to actually install an application, and I'm going to use the one that the book uses, and I'm going to use apt to install it. And it's vsftpd. Anything that ends in a D is typically a daemon, right? So this should install the vsftp package for us and allow us to have an FTP server on our machine. So once this is installed, I can check its status, I can stop its status, stop it service, and I can restart it, or I can start it up again. So we know that the package is vsftp. The service unit file is vsftpd.service. So now that we've installed vsftp, the FTP service, the package and the service that runs it, we're going to check its status. We're going to do that by using the systemctl command. So we have to put sudo in front of it, and it's sudo systemctl space status vsftpd, and it'll come back with the process ID and if it's active and running and how long it's been active. So this one's been running for 2 minutes and 36 seconds. Use the queue and we're out of it. We can stop it. We can use that same command. Instead of putting status in here, we can do stop and it'll actually stop it. So if we check its status again, you're going to see that it's not running. So it's loaded, but it's inactive. You see the active, where active colon inactive, that means it's not running. So we can go back and start it again. S-T-A-R-T. So stop, start, restart is the other option we can do with these. Always check the status, just to make sure it's running when you're done with it. So any service unit file that you have running in your system that you want to stop, check its status to see if it's running after you've installed it. Things like we're going to do during the rest of the semester. Tonight we're going to do one with another tool called Chrony. So package installed, so you have to go download from the repositories, and then you check the status, and then the next thing you do is you can check config files. We're going to get into VSFTP later on, so I just wanted to use that as an example of our service unit file and how to manage that with the systemctl command. So we're going to get into a config file later, even though this has one here, etc vsftpd.c1f. We're going to get into that in 2 weeks. Because FTP is what we're going to, no, actually no, FTP is a little bit later, so we're going to get into that in a few weeks, maybe 4 weeks, when we talk about web servers. Let's get on to the next step. So the next thing I want to talk about is a protocol called NTP, Network Time Protocol. So we're going to use a package. It's called Chrony, C-H-R-O-N-Y. And this uses a protocol called NTP to synchronize your time of your client to a time of a server. Chrony is the actual application that runs on the server. So we have to install it to have it work. Sudo apt install Chrony. And since we've already done the password, it didn't ask me for that anymore. So now it's installing Chrony. Chrony is what we call an NTP server, meaning that all the clients that you have to point to Chrony in order to work. So they can synchronize the time, their time, with the Chrony server or the NTP server. We now can check to see if it is running. And we just type in Chrony right here. And we see that it's running. Now that we've installed our Chrony Network Time Protocol server, let's go check its config file out. And what do you think the config file is? It's in the CD, and we go to etc, and Chrony is the default folder for it. So inside here, we should have a chrony.conf file. So let's go look at this chrony.conf file. Less Chrony. Oops. Chrony.conf, sorry. Typo. So inside here, you'll notice that these pools are pools of servers that are out there that this service, this daemon, goes out and checks to synchronize its time with. So what we're going to do is we're going to rem these out. I mean, if we don't want to use the default ones, or we can just leave them in there and add our own. And then once you get confident with your own, then you can go and remark all the others out there, so you only are using your own. So where would you go in order to find out any public NTP servers? If you do a search, you'll find some out there. And where you want to go is the NIST Internet Time Service. This is run by the government, and they are attached to the atomic clock for the country and for the government. And so what we can do is we can put in either the name or the IP address of the servers in there. So let's go put the name in, and it's time-a-g.nist.gov into the config file. And we're going to use gedit, and we're going to do sudo, because it's a system file, gedit cronny.c1f. And what we're going to do here, and instead of pool, we're going to point to an individual server, and it is, what was the name of that again? time-a-g.nist.gov. time-a-g.nist.gov. Let's double check to make sure that's it. I do believe that's it. time-a-g. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to do prefer. And prefer is the way of telling the clients that you prefer this over the other servers that are set up in here, or the pools of servers. And so if we click this, save, so we're saving that config file. In order to apply the config file to the service, the cronny service that's running, we have to restart that service. So what we can do is sudo systemctl, let's stop cronny, and it stopped it. Now let's start it again. Oops. So we can start it back up, and what it's going to do is go and connect to that config file, and we can check its status. And it's running. And it's not using our source. You see how it's using these two sources right here? It's using probably from the pools. What we could do is we can modify that and add more. But you get the gist of the config file and what you're doing. When you find the servers that you really trust, and like I said, you can use the default Ubuntu ones that a lot of people do, or you can use the government ones, which are from the NIST website. Right now, that's all I wanted to show you. On Monday night, I'm going to go over some more stuff from the chapter, more about systemd and how it functions and some other things on there. I wanted to get into those basic, how do you start and stop a service, why do you start and stop a service, the service unit files, these configs and everything. And just to wrap it up, that service unit files can always be start and stopped. Anytime you make a config change to a service or daemon that's running, then you have to start and stop and start it back up again for that config to be applied to that daemon. Otherwise, it'll never get applied unless it gets rebooted. And as we know, servers don't get rebooted very often, so that's why you have to do that. Make sure you read the chapter, study the material, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.